Origins of writing and early record-keeping. Cave paintings and prehistoric communication. In the hush of ancient time, before ink touched parchment or script-adorned scroll, humanity first found its voice not in words, but in pictures. Deep within the earth, in cool and darkened caverns hidden from sun and storm, early humans painted their world upon stone. These cave paintings, delicate and patient expressions of experience and memory, mark the very beginning of our journey into written communication. In places such as Lascaux in France and Altamira in Spain, handprints, bison, deer, and swirling lines were meticulously painted using crushed minerals mixed with animal fat. Each stroke told a story of the hunt, of the spirits believed to guide them, of the cycle of seasons and the bond between man and nature. These images were not merely art. They were records, messages, prayers. They captured the rhythms of life long before letters existed. These cave paintings are estimated to be tens of thousands of years old, and they show a remarkable consistency in symbolic language across great distances. Whether they were intended to convey specific events or general beliefs, they serve as the earliest known efforts to preserve thought outside the mind. In this dim-lit beginning, the seed of paper's future was quietly planted, as mankind yearned to record what passed before their eyes and within their hearts. Sumerian clay tablets and cuneiform script. As millennia unfolded, humans transitioned from wandering hunter-gatherers to settled communities. And with agriculture came administration. And with administration, the need to record. In the ancient lands of Mesopotamia, nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the Sumerians began to inscribe their thoughts not on walls but on clay. These tablets, pressed by reeds to form wedge-shaped marks, became known as cuneiform, from the Latin cuneus, meaning wedge. Initially developed to tally livestock, grain, and trade, the cuneiform script evolved to embrace poetry, legal codes, and diplomatic treaties. One could imagine the steady hands of scribes in the bustling city of yore, moistening clay, flattening it into neat rectangles, and imprinting lines with practiced ease. Once dry, the clay hardened into a permanent record, as enduring as stone. Though heavy and fragile by modern standards, these tablets represented a monumental leap forward. Knowledge now had permanence. Empires rose and fell, yet their voices remained in these simple yet profound marks. The paperless past still managed to capture the thunder of kings and the silence of the stars through shaped earth and careful strokes. Egyptian hieroglyphics and papyrus scrolls. Southward, along the life-giving Nile, the ancient Egyptians embraced writing with similar zeal. They developed hieroglyphics, a script so intricate and pictorial that it seemed more art than language. But unlike their Mesopotamian counterparts, the Egyptians took a different material path. They harvested the papyrus reed that grew in the river's shallows, splitting its stalk, pressing its layers, and forming it into long, flexible sheets. Papyrus scrolls revolutionized portability and readability. Where clay was weighty, papyrus was light. Where stone was fixed, papyrus traveled. These scrolls found homes in temples, libraries, and tombs. They carried spells, histories, hymns, and inventories, all in that elegant, bird and reed script which adorned the walls of pyramids and the insides of coffins. In the bustling scriptoria of Thebes and Memphis, scribes would unroll a fresh scroll and set their brushes to work. With inks made of soot and ochre, they brought the divine and the mundane to life. Pharaohs were declared sons of gods. Wheat harvests were tabulated. The journeys of souls through the afterlife were mapped in luminous color. Papyrus was, for a time, the closest ancestor to modern paper. It bent, it folded, it curled, and with it, thought became fluid. The wisdom of Egypt, preserved across centuries, would ripple outward, influencing faraway lands and laying the groundwork for a new kind of memory. Early Chinese inscriptions on bones and bronze. While Egypt bloomed and Mesopotamia murmured in clay, China stirred with its own scriptive awakening. Long before paper graced the empire, the Chinese etched their hopes and inquiries into tortoise shells and ox scapulae. These were the oracle bones of the Shang dynasty, tools for divination, communication with ancestors, and ultimately, for documentation. A king might ask, will the harvest be bountiful? Or shall we wage war upon the neighboring state? These questions were inscribed upon bone or shell, then subjected to heat until cracks appeared. The resulting patterns were read as answers from the spirit world, and the question, crack, and response were all meticulously recorded. Later, bronze vessels began to bear inscriptions too. The development of ideographic scripts revealed humanity's deepening intellectual capacity. People were not just naming the world, they were interpreting it. And in doing so, they were preparing for a future where writing would not merely reflect life, but shape it. Paper, when it arrived, would not only carry these scripts, it would amplify them, spread them, liberate them from clay and stone. But in these early stages, it was the symbols themselves that mattered, slow-burning candles in the long night of human memory. Mesopotamian record-keeping practices. In the cool, dim rooms of ancient Sumerian temples and royal halls, records were kept with remarkable diligence. These were no mere scribbles, they were organized archives, the foundations of law, trade, and governance. Scribes, often trained from youth, learned thousands of cuneiform symbols and how to arrange them with clarity and precision. Every transaction, a basket of barley, a head of cattle, a shipment of copper, was recorded. Names, dates, and weights filled the clay. Temple libraries stored thousands of tablets, each catalogued with careful thought. The scale of administration was vast, and writing made it possible. Kings like Hammurabi saw writing as a tool of justice. His code, inscribed in stone, echoed across the empire. Clear, permanent, and public. This was not merely communication, it was control, continuity, and civilization. Though cumbersome by modern standards, these practices underscore the human desire to fix memory in place. They hint at the longing for something easier, lighter, more flexible. Something that would one day arrive in the form of paper. Materials used before paper: bark, leaves, and leather. In lands not blessed with papyrus or clay, people turned to what they had. Birch bark was used in parts of India and Russia. Palm leaves, dried and trimmed, carried the sacred sutras of Buddhist monks. In Europe, parchment and vellum, treated skins of sheep, goats, and calves, became the preferred medium for centuries. Each material had its strengths and its burdens. Bark was plentiful but brittle. Leaves were flexible but prone to decay. Leather was durable but expensive and labor-intensive. Yet in all cases, the purpose was the same: to hold meaning, to transport thought. In the absence of paper, ingenuity abounded. Some manuscripts stretched across dozens of stitched leaves. Others were rolled, folded, or stitched into codices. The mind refused to remain silent, and the hands found a way to keep its echo alive. Scrolls versus tablets: how format affected use. Format shaped not just how people wrote, but how they thought. Tablets demanded brevity and permanence. Scrolls encouraged flow and length. A tablet might preserve a law. A scroll might unfold a tale. In temples, scrolls were unfurled by candlelight, their long form ideal for liturgy and genealogy. In marketplaces, tablets passed from hand to hand, bearing contracts, receipts, oaths. The physical act of reading, turning a scroll, flipping a tablet, influenced the rhythm of comprehension. Later, as codices emerged, the format again evolved. But in these early days, the choice between scroll and tablet was not trivial. It was a choice of how memory would move: slowly, in slabs of clay, or swiftly, along curling lengths of reed or leaf. Religious and governmental documentation. From the beginning, writing served power, both spiritual and political. Priests recorded omens. Kings chronicled victories. Taxes were calculated. Offerings noted. Edicts proclaimed. Religious texts, especially, were treated with reverence. Their materials were purified. Their script immaculate. Errors were punishable. In the Hebrew tradition, scribes meticulously copied Torah scrolls, letter by letter, breath by breath. In India, Vedic hymns were etched onto palm leaves with sacred tools. Governments too leaned on writing. Census rolls, land deeds, marriage records, diplomacy, tribute. Across continents, ink and stylus made empires run. In the absence of paper, These duties were slower, more constrained. But the will to record, to fix law and faith in visible form, never faltered. Limitations of early writing mediums. For all their ingenuity, these early materials had limitations. Clay was heavy and fragile. Papyrus, though elegant, disintegrated in damp climates. Palm leaves curled with time. Parchment was costly and required the sacrifice of animals. Bones and bronze were too rare and rigid for wide use. Storage posed problems. Transport was cumbersome. Editing was difficult. Duplication required enormous effort. And always, there was the lurking threat of fire, flood, or decay. Knowledge, once written, could still vanish. The world waited for something better. Something light, strong, cheap. Something that could flow like thought and endure like stone. Something that would arrive, in the quiet hands of a Chinese court official, bearing mulberry bark and old rags, ready to change the course of memory forever. The invention of paper in ancient China. The Han Dynasty, a golden age of innovation. In the still and steady dawn of the 1st century CE, under the broad skies and winding rivers of ancient China, the Han Dynasty flourished like the blossoming of plum trees in early spring. This dynasty, which had risen from the ashes of the Qin and stretched its influence across much of East Asia, was a time not only of imperial power but of gentle, ceaseless innovation. It was in this golden age of thought, order, and elegant administration that one of humanity's quietest revolutions was born, the invention of paper. The Han emperors believed deeply in the virtues of governance and knowledge. Their courts were filled with ministers, scholars, and record keepers. Great walls rose, trade with the distant West thrived along the Silk Road, and Confucian ideals shaped them, had served the realm, and in the year 105 CE, he would create something more enduring than statues or scrolls, a new kind of paper. Drawing upon methods likely long experimented with by artisans and villagers before him, Cai Lun refined the process into something replicable and efficient. He gathered materials not of stone or skin, but of old rags, bark from the mulberry tree, fishing nets, and hemp waste. These items, soaked and mashed into pulp, were spread onto a fine screen, drained, pressed, and left to dry. What emerged was thin, flexible, and strong enough to write on. It held ink without bleeding. It could be folded, rolled, stacked. It was a canvas waiting patiently for ink. In that moment, in a basin of water and fiber, history changed forever. Cai Lun presented his creation to the emperor, who, recognizing its utility, commended him. Though humble in appearance, this invention would carry dynasties, dreams, religions, revolutions, and revelations. The soul of civilization had found its vessel. Materials used: mulberry bark, hemp, and rags. The genius of early Chinese paper lay not only in the process but in the choice of ingredients: natural, plentiful, and renewable. The inner bark of the mulberry tree, long used in textiles, proved soft yet strong. Hemp fibers, already familiar from rope and cloth, brought resilience. Old rags, discarded remnants of once fine garments, offered an early form of recycling. These materials were pulped with water into a slurry, a soft, milky mix that looked more like soup than future scripture. The slurry was ladled onto a screen made of fine bamboo or silk mesh, allowing the water to drain while leaving behind a thin layer of interlocked fibers. Once dried and pressed, the result was a sheet of paper, smooth yet textured, light yet durable. It was not glossy like silk nor brittle like bamboo. It was something entirely new, a silent revolution, an invitation to write not with difficulty, but with ease. The beauty of this material lay also in its humility. These were things others discarded: rag ends, bark scraps, net fragments. In Cai Lun's hands, they became the medium through which empires would remember and poets would dream. The papermaking process: soaking, pulping, pressing, drying. The process of making early paper was simple in theory, yet delicate in practice. Every step required care, for the fibers were temperamental and the balance between water and pulp had to be just right. First came the soaking. The mulberry bark and hemp were softened in water for days, even weeks, until the fibers loosened. Then came the pulping, often done by beating the soaked mass with wooden mallets, breaking it down until it became a cloudy suspension of fiber and fluid. Next, a screen, often framed bamboo, was dipped into the pulp, lifted with a gentle shake, and held aloft as water drained through. What remained on the screen was a fragile, fibrous mat, the unborn sheet of paper. This mat was then transferred onto a flat surface, pressed under stones or wooden weights to expel moisture, and finally left to dry in the sun. Once dry, the sheets could be polished with stones or shells for smoothness, ready to receive brush and ink. Each sheet bore the faint imprint of its mesh mold. Each bore the scent of earth and time. It was a process both tactile and serene, as if the maker wove silence and patience into the very fabric of the sheet. Early uses of paper in imperial China. With its adoption by the court, paper soon found myriad uses. It became the medium for government records, lighter than bamboo, easier to store. Officials wrote reports and edicts. Scholars copied texts. Inventories, maps, legal decisions, all flowed now onto this supple new surface. In religious life, paper became a vessel for the sacred. Buddhist monks copied sutras with exquisite care. Daoist charms were inscribed on paper and burned to carry messages to heaven. An entire metaphysical dimension opened, where paper was not merely material, but a spiritual bridge. Artists, too, found inspiration. The Chinese brush, already an elegant instrument, now danced more freely on the softer surface. Landscapes, calligraphy, poems, all bloomed in black ink upon white sheets, forming a harmony that would become iconic. Even in everyday life, paper found roles: wrapping, packaging, decoration. It seeped into the corners of existence, soft as breath and yet profoundly transformative. The people of China, whether noble or commoner, now lived with a new companion, quiet, versatile, enduring. Paper versus silk and bamboo, a comparative advantage. Compared to silk, paper was vastly more affordable. Silk, while smooth and receptive to ink, was a luxury fabric, often reserved for the elite. Bamboo and wood, while abundant, were heavy, rigid, and cumbersome to write on. A single book on bamboo might weigh as much as a sack of grain. Paper was the perfect balance. It was light, cheap, and could be mass-produced. It could be bound into books, stacked, mailed, hidden. Its very nature encouraged the spread of information, the multiplication of ideas. Where bamboo dictated brevity, paper invited length. Where silk whispered wealth, paper promised access. It democratized thought in a quiet, persistent way. In the classroom, the workshop, the temple, and the palace, paper became the new standard, not by decree, but by sheer utility. And once adopted, it began to evolve, adapting to every need and aesthetic whim, proving itself again and again as the superior medium for a thinking, recording, dreaming civilization. The spread of papermaking within China. From the imperial court, papermaking spread outward, first to nearby provinces, then to distant villages. Local workshops sprang up, each refining the technique with regional materials and traditions. In Sichuan, they used bast fibers. In the north, straw and reeds. In the south, even rice husk. Education transformed. Paper allowed for student texts, practice sheets, and personal notes. Civil service exams, which shaped the bureaucracy for centuries, relied on the ease of paper scrolls. The mind, once constrained by the weight of its own memory, now had a pliant, ever-ready companion. In the arts, calligraphy soared. Paper responded to the brush like silk never could, capturing nuance and pressure with intimate fidelity. The scholar-artist emerged, part philosopher, part poet, part painter, and paper was his stage. Papermaking in Buddhist monasteries. Buddhism, traveling from India into China, found fertile ground not only in minds and hearts but in the soft whiteness of paper. Monasteries became centers of both spiritual and technological growth, and many took to papermaking with fervor. Monks needed texts, sutras, prayers, manuals, and copying them was a holy act. Every brushstroke was devotion, every sheet a step toward enlightenment. Paper allowed the mass reproduction of scriptures. In some temples, Entire halls were devoted to scribing and printing. Paper also served ceremonial roles. Prayer sheets were burned, tossed into rivers, or buried. Talismans were drawn, folded, worn. In every case, the physical paper was merely the shell, its meaning soared into the unseen. The Buddhist embrace of paper helped solidify its place in society. It gave the material not just practical value, but spiritual significance. And in doing so, it spread the art of papermaking farther and deeper into the fabric of Chinese life. Legacy of early Chinese papermaking. The legacy of early Chinese papermaking is vast and still unfolding. It changed not only how people wrote but how they thought. It lightened the load of memory, expanded the reach of language, and prepared the world for revolutions in science, art, religion, and governance. Cai Lun's name, once known only to imperial clerks, is now spoken in reverence by historians around the globe. His contribution stands among the most profound of human history, as vital as fire, as transformative as the wheel. The simple sheet of paper, born from bark and rag, began its journey here, beside bamboo forests and mulberry groves, under the careful eye of artisans and the quiet patronage of scholars. It was a beginning not of spectacle, but of subtle, lasting change. From this quiet origin in Han China, paper would spread across continents and centuries, carrying with it the breath of civilizations yet to come. Paper spreads across Asia. Paper's introduction to Korea and Japan. The invention of paper in Han China had marked a turning point in the way civilizations recorded their thoughts, their laws, their beliefs, and their stories. But it was not destined to remain within China's borders for long. Like a gentle stream that flows beyond its source to nourish distant lands, the knowledge of papermaking began to make its way eastward, traveling through silent mountains and quiet valleys until it reached the neighboring lands of Korea and Japan. Korea, known in antiquity as Goguryeo and later Silla and Beach, shared a deep and ongoing cultural exchange with China. As early as the 4th century CE, Chinese influence was already evident in Korean administration, art, and literature. It was during this time that papermaking was introduced to the Korean peninsula, likely brought by scholars, Buddhist monks, and traveling craftsmen. The Korean courts, recognizing its immense value, adopted paper eagerly. It soon became an essential tool in governance and scholarship. From Korea, the knowledge of papermaking would take yet another journey, this time to the islands of Japan. The earliest introduction of paper to Japan occurred around the early 7th century CE, during the Asuka period. Historical accounts suggest that it was through the Korean kingdom of Beach that Japan received not only papermaking techniques but also the broader teachings of Buddhism and Chinese script. These twin gifts, paper and the written word, would go on to reshape Japanese culture in profound and enduring ways. The Japanese court, under Emperor Tenmu and later Emperor Suiko, saw the utility of paper in centralizing state affairs and in spreading the Buddhist faith. What began as a foreign import quickly became a native tradition, deeply embedded in Japanese artistic and spiritual life. Thus, through the careful hands of travelers and monks, the seed planted in Han China had now begun to blossom across East Asia, silent, enduring, and ever-growing. The role of Buddhist monks in spreading paper. It is impossible to speak of the spread of paper without giving due reverence to the quiet stewards of spiritual and scholarly life in East Asia, the Buddhist monks. With robes the color of autumn leaves and minds focused on stillness, these gentle wanderers carried more than chants and sutras. They carried knowledge. They carried methods. They carried paper. As Buddhism made its way from India into China, and then from China to Korea and Japan, so too did the monks carry the practical tools needed to preserve the teachings of the Buddha. Chief among these was paper, lightweight, flexible, ideal for writing and copying religious texts. In their monasteries, nestled in mountains or hidden beside streams, monks became papermakers. They were scribes and artisans both, combining labor and devotion. They refined the techniques they had learned from Chinese craftsmen, adapting them to local resources and needs. They built vats and screens, pounded bark and hemp, and development of washi, traditional Japanese paper. In Japan, papermaking did not remain a mere imitation of Chinese methods. Over time, it evolved into something uniquely Japanese, washi, the traditional handmade paper that would come to be celebrated for its strength, beauty, and artistry. The word washi combines wa, meaning Japanese, and sha, meaning paper. Its origins trace back to the early adoption of Chinese techniques, but as Japanese artisans refined the process, they began to favor different materials, chiefly the inner bark of the keizo, mulberry tree, as well as mitsumeta and gampai plants. Washi is not just paper, it is a labor of love. The bark is harvested in winter, stripped, steamed, cleaned, and then beaten into fibers. A binding agent, neri, made from the roots of the tororoaoe plant, is added to the pulp. This slows the drainage of water, allowing the fibers to spread evenly across the screen, resulting in a remarkably strong and thin sheet. Washi has a texture like no other, soft yet fibrous, translucent yet durable. It was used for writing, painting, printing, wrapping, even clothing and household items. It adorned folding screens, lanterns, and calligraphy scrolls. In temples and palaces, washi became both functional and sacred. Papermaking became a respected craft, with entire villages devoted to its production. Generations of families passed down techniques, each adding their touch to the evolving tradition. Today, washi is recognized by UNESCO as an intangible cultural heritage, a testament to its enduring place in Japanese life. It began as a humble gift from China, but in Japanese hands, paper became poetry. Silk Road and the movement of knowledge. While the Silk Road is often remembered for its caravans of spice and silk, for its traders and camels crossing deserts under starlit skies, it was also a path for quieter treasures, among them, the knowledge of papermaking. Stretching from the heart of China through Central Asia and reaching as far as the Mediterranean, the Silk Road was more than a highway of commerce. It was a thread that connected cultures, a bridge between empires. Ideas traveled it as surely as goods, and among the most transformative of these ideas was the art of making paper. As early as the 5th and 6th centuries CE, knowledge of papermaking began moving westward along these routes. Buddhist monks, merchants, scholars, and travelers carried with them not just books but the means of making them. In oasis towns and border cities, places like Dunhuang, Turpan, and Samarkand, papermaking took root. The Silk Road also facilitated the exchange of raw materials and tools. New fibers, such as flax and cotton, were tested. Local methods mingled with Chinese traditions, creating regional variants. In this way, paper became both a unifier and a mirror of diversity. And through the Silk Road's long winding course, paper would eventually reach the Islamic world, a journey we will follow in a later chapter. But even within Asia, the impact of these routes was immense. Paper was no longer confined to the East. It was becoming the medium of Eurasia. Silent and soft, it moved across borders, reshaping civilizations along the way. Papermaking techniques in Central Asia. As the art of papermaking spread westward, Central Asia became one of its most vibrant new homes. This region, marked by desert steppes, ancient cities, and flowing rivers, had long been a crossroads of culture. Cities such as Samarkand, Bukhara, and Tashkent became centers of exchange, and now, they would become centers of papermaking as well. Chinese prisoners of war, captured during battles between the Tang dynasty and Arab forces in the 8th century, are often credited with bringing papermaking knowledge to Samarkand. Though the exact details are shrouded in legend, what is certain is that Central Asians swiftly embraced and adapted the technology. Papermaking in Central Asia introduced new fibers such as linen and flax. The techniques were modified to suit local environments and available tools. The resulting paper had a different texture and color from Chinese or Japanese papers, often thicker and creamier, ideal for the calligraphy and manuscripts favored by local scholars. The cities of the region became renowned for their paper. Samarkand, in particular, developed a reputation that would echo across the Islamic world. Its paper was prized for its quality, and local artisans guarded their methods closely. In workshops shaded by poplar trees, craftsmen soaked, pounded, and dried their sheets with precision. Water wheels turned steadily, powering hammers and mills. And with each new sheet, another page of history was made. Influence of Chinese culture on Korean scholarship. The spread of paper into Korea did more than revolutionize materials. It reshaped thought itself. Korean scholarship, already shaped by Chinese philosophical and administrative systems, found new depth and breadth with the availability of paper. During the Three Kingdoms period, and later under the unified Silla and Goryeo dynasties, Korea embraced Confucian ideals and Chinese classics. Scholars studied Chinese texts, translated sutras, and composed their own works in classical Chinese. Paper allowed for the preservation and multiplication of this scholarship. Books could be copied and shared. Schools and monasteries could maintain libraries. The state could issue edicts, maintain records, and develop examinations for officials. Printing also took root early in Korea. By the 8th century, woodblock printing was being used to replicate Buddhist texts. Later, Korea would develop movable metal type, a century before Gutenberg's printing press, further expanding the role of paper in education and governance. Thus, through the influence of Chinese culture and the enabling power of paper, Korea developed a rich scholarly tradition that would echo through its history. Paper, silent and supple, underpinned it all. The use of paper in religious texts. Across Asia, paper quickly became inseparable from adaptation of paper in artistic traditions. Artists, too, found in paper a companion more faithful than silk or wood. Across Asia, painters, calligraphers, and artisans adopted paper as their medium, and with it, they brought forth a new era of visual expression. In China, the art of ink painting flourished on paper scrolls. Landscapes in mist, bamboo in wind, scholars lost in thought. The brush found new freedom on paper, capturing nuance and emotion with fluid grace. In Japan, washi became the foundation for ukiyo-e prints, for delicate fan paintings, and for the subtle aesthetics of wabi-sabi. Paper folded into origami, floated in lanterns, and adorned rooms as shiji screens. In Korea, paper became the canvas for ink art and the material for crafts such as hanji, a traditional Korean paper prized for its durability and beauty. Every region found its voice through paper. It became not just a medium, but an inspiration. Early paper industries in Asian regions. As demand for paper grew, so did the need for organized production. Across Asia, early paper industries began to form, sometimes in monasteries, sometimes in towns, often beside rivers that powered their simple mills. In Japan, entire villages such as Eshin devoted themselves to washi. In China, papermaking centers emerged in Sichuan, Fujian, and along the Yangtze. In Korea, Goryeo-era records describe paper taxes and state-managed paper workshops. These industries were often small, family-run, and rooted in local resources. They blended craft and commerce, culture and economy. Their work was slow, meticulous, and often seasonal. But from their steady hands came the sheets upon which history unfolded. Cultural significance of paper in Eastern societies. Over centuries, paper became more than just a tool. In Asia, it became part of identity, woven into rituals, festivals, aesthetics, and philosophy. In Japan, the tanzaku, slender paper strips for poetry, expressed fleeting beauty. In Korea, paper-covered windows softened light into quiet rooms. In China, paper dragons danced at festivals, and red envelopes carried blessings. Paper taught patience, precision, and impermanence. It was both ephemeral and eternal. From scrolls and sutras to fans and lanterns, paper touched every part of life. It whispered stories, prayers, art, and dreams. And in doing so, it became a silent thread that connected generations across Asia. The arrival of paper in the Islamic world. The Battle of Talas and the capture of papermakers. The year was 751 CE. The vast steppes of Central Asia stretched beneath a wide, cloudless sky. Along the banks of the Talas River, where the modern-day borders of Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan now meet, a quiet yet world-changing confrontation was about to unfold. On one side stood the forces of the Abbasid Caliphate, the rising power in the Islamic world. On the other, the armies of the Tang dynasty, proud guardians of China's imperial east. Though the battle itself was neither the largest nor most decisive in military history, its aftermath would have consequences far beyond the battlefield. The confrontation, known simply as the Battle of Talas, marked a turning point, not merely in political power, but in cultural transmission. Among the prisoners captured by the victorious Abbasid forces were Chinese artisans, including several skilled papermakers. These individuals, once employed in the workshops of the Tang dynasty, now found themselves in unfamiliar lands. Their craft, long a guarded secret of the Chinese Empire, would now take root in Islamic soil. The quiet, painstaking knowledge of how to turn pulp into paper, once confined to China and neighboring East Asian cultures, had crossed into a new world. And so, under the golden sun of the Central Asian plains, an invisible revolution began. The knowledge of papermaking, that silent force of civilization, had entered the Islamic world. It would change the course of science, literature, religion, and governance for centuries to come. The artisans themselves are largely lost to history. Their names are unrecorded, their lives unremarked in chronicles. Yet through their hands, something remarkable was passed on. From the edge of empire to the heart of Islamic civilization, the journey of paper had begun anew. Establishment of paper mills in Samarkand. Following the Battle of Talas, the city of Samarkand rose to unexpected prominence as a new cradle of papermaking. Nestled in the heart of Central Asia, Samarkand had long been a crossroads of trade, of ideas, of languages and peoples. It was here, among its domed mosques and bustling markets, that the first paper mill in the Islamic world was established. Using the knowledge acquired from their Chinese captives, in the quiet courtyards and shaded workshops of this ancient city, a revolution was unfolding, not with swords or proclamations, but with water, pulp, and patient hands. Improvements made by Muslim inventors. Once adopted into the Islamic world, papermaking did not remain static. Instead, it was subject to refinement, innovation, and transformation by Muslim inventors and craftsmen. The Islamic world, known for its spirit of inquiry and adaptation, embraced papermaking not just as a craft but as a science. One of the earliest and most significant changes involved the materials used. Chinese and Japanese papers relied heavily on mulberry and rice straw. In contrast, Islamic papermakers began to favor cotton and linen rags, byproducts of the textile industry, which were plentiful and offered superior strength. These materials produced a smoother, whiter paper that was well suited to Arabic calligraphy. Another improvement was the development of sizing techniques. In earlier Chinese methods, paper was often unsized, making it highly absorbent and prone to ink bleeding. Islamic papermakers introduced gelatin or starch-based sizing to strengthen the paper and control ink absorption. This made the paper more durable and enhanced its suitability for writing and illumination. Moreover, the methods of pulping were refined. Instead of laboriously hand-pounding the fibers, Muslim inventors employed water-powered mills to automate the process. These innovations not only increased the scale of production, but also ensured greater consistency in paper quality. The introduction of mold screens with distinctive patterns, such as chain lines and laid lines, added a subtle beauty to the sheets and later helped identify their origins. Through ingenuity and careful craftsmanship, the Islamic world did not merely adopt papermaking, it elevated it. From the riverbanks of Samarkand to the great libraries of Baghdad, paper became an emblem of a civilization that valued knowledge, precision, and beauty. Paper in Islamic scholarship and libraries. With the proliferation of paper came a profound transformation in the intellectual life of the Islamic world. Previously, writing materials such as parchment, papyrus, and wood were costly and less practical for widespread use. But paper, lightweight, affordable, and easy to produce, changed everything. Islamic scholarship flourished like never before. In cities such as Baghdad, Damascus, Cairo, Cordoba, and Bukhara, scholars wrote, copied, and shared manuscripts in fields as diverse as astronomy, mathematics, medicine, philosophy, theology, and literature. Paper made it possible to compile encyclopedias, to annotate texts, to preserve commentaries, and to distribute books on a scale that had never been feasible before. Mosques, schools, and private households began to house personal libraries. Books were no longer the exclusive property of kings and priests. They became accessible to the learned classes and, increasingly, to merchants and artisans. The rise of book markets, especially in Baghdad's famed Suq al-Warakin, the street of the booksellers, reflected this cultural blossoming. Scribes and binders offered their services. Students bought paper by the stack. Debates echoed in courtyards, guided by paper-bound texts. The very rhythm of daily life changed. Bureaucracies became more efficient, courts more organized, and education more widespread. All because of paper, that unassuming invention now at the heart of Islamic civilization. Preservation and translation of ancient texts. The availability of paper also enabled a momentous intellectual endeavor, the translation and preservation of ancient knowledge. During the early Abbasid period, particularly in the 8th and 9th centuries, a concerted effort was made to gather, translate, and preserve works of science and philosophy from Greek, Persian, Indian, and Syriac sources. Paper provided the means to copy and disseminate these texts on an unprecedented scale. The works of Plato, Aristotle, Hippocrates, Galen, and Ptolemy were translated into Arabic. Sanskrit treatises on mathematics and medicine found new life. Zoroastrian scriptures and Babylonian star charts were transcribed and studied. Many of these ancient texts would have been lost to history had they not been preserved in Arabic translation, written on paper made in the mills of the Islamic world. Later, these same texts would travel westward into Europe, sparking the Renaissance. But it was in the Islamic world that they first found sanctuary. This great project of translation and preservation, often referred to as the Greco-Arabic translation movement, would not have been possible without paper. It allowed for the mass copying of texts and the spread of knowledge across vast distances. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad. At the center of this intellectual movement stood the House of Wisdom, Beit al-Hikmah, in Baghdad. Founded in the early 9th century under the reign of Caliph Harun al-Rashid and expanded by his son al-Ma'mun, it became the jewel of Islamic scholarly life. This institution was not a school in the modern sense, but rather a combination of a library, translation bureau, and research center. Scholars from across the empire gathered here. Muslims, Christians, Jews, Zoroastrians, all working together in a spirit of inquiry and learning. Paper was everywhere in the House of Wisdom. It filled shelves, covered desks, fluttered in the hands of scholars deep in thought. Translators used it to record the teachings of ancient masters. Calligraphy and the art of Islamic manuscripts. In a culture that discouraged the depiction of human figures in religious contexts, calligraphy became the highest form of artistic expression. And with the widespread use of paper, this art reached new heights of refinement and beauty. Islamic calligraphy, flowing and rhythmic, found its perfect partner in paper. The smooth surface allowed for elegant strokes. The consistency of ink absorption allowed for precision and delicacy. Manuscripts were adorned with geometric patterns, floral motifs, and golden illuminations. The Quran was copied on paper in intricate scripts, Kufic, Naskh, Thuluth, each a masterpiece of form and devotion. Paper transformed the written word into a visual art. It elevated language into beauty, and through the calligrapher's hand, the very act of writing became sacred. Spread of paper to North Africa and Spain. From its Central Asian beginnings, paper moved westward, carried by traders, scholars, and administrators. By the 10th century, paper mills had been established in Egypt, Tunisia, and Morocco. And soon, paper crossed the Strait of Gibraltar into Al-Andalus, the Islamic territories of Spain. In cities like Córdoba, Granada, and Toledo, paper fueled a flowering of learning. Libraries multiplied. Schools expanded. The translation movement continued, now from Arabic into Latin. The paper mills of Fez and Zativa became renowned for their output. And from Spain, paper would eventually enter Christian Europe, altering the history of the West. But its journey began centuries earlier, under the sunlit domes of Samarkand. Paper's role in the Islamic Golden Age. Through all these changes, in trade, science, art, religion, and governance, paper remained at the heart of the Islamic Golden Age. It was the quiet enabler of progress, the invisible thread that linked scholars across time and space. Without paper, there might have been no House of Wisdom, no encyclopedias of medicine, no translation of Aristotle, no illuminated QANS, no contracts or correspondence. It was the medium upon which an entire civilization was written. And though the papermakers of Samarkand may have worked in humble silence, their legacy is anything but quiet. It echoes in every page of Islamic history, soft, enduring, and immeasurably powerful. Paper reaches medieval Europe. Paper's journey through Al-Andalus. In the gentle unfolding of time, as the centuries turned slowly upon the great wheel of history, paper made its way into the western edge of the known world, into Europe, not with a sudden burst, but with the quiet persistence of knowledge seeking new ground. Its journey, noble and profound, was not forged by conquerors or kings alone, but by scholars, merchants, craftsmen, and those humble souls who carried traditions across borders and empires. The gateway to this new frontier was the splendid and luminous land of Al-Andalus. Al-Andalus, that portion of the Iberian Peninsula under Islamic rule from the early 8th century onward, was a realm of remarkable sophistication. From the bustling streets of Córdoba to the serene gardens of Granada, the region shimmered with learning, art, and architecture. It was in this climate, vibrant, multilingual, and multicultural, that paper found a most fertile home. Through the ports and caravan routes of North Africa, from the mills of Fez and the markets of Tunis, sheets of paper and rolls of raw pulp entered Iberia. Here, in cities where Arabic, Latin, Hebrew, and Mozarabic tongues intertwined, paper was embraced for its practicality and elegance. It flowed into scriptoria, libraries, mosques, synagogues, and Christian monasteries alike, allowing a diversity of communities to record their prayers, poems, treatises, and trade agreements with greater ease than ever before. Córdoba, in particular, emerged as a beacon of paper usage. With its renowned libraries and scholars, its scribes and translators, Córdoba became a city of books, and those books were increasingly made not of parchment but of paper, that lighter, more accessible cousin of the ancient skins. From this cultural confluence, paper began its slow and steady spread beyond the frontiers of Islam, crossing over into the Christian kingdoms of northern Spain, then through the passes of the Pyrenees into France, Italy, and beyond. Its journey, quiet yet unstoppable, would change the fabric of European civilization forever. The resistance to paper by European elites. But though paper had arrived, it was not immediately embraced with open arms by all. The noble and ecclesiastical elites of medieval Europe viewed this foreign invention with a certain suspicion, and not without reason. For centuries, European scribes had labored upon parchment, a writing surface crafted from the skins of calves, sheep, or goats. Durable, smooth, and steeped in tradition, parchment had become the sacred medium. The techniques employed in Sativa owed much to the traditions of Islamic North Africa and the legacy of the Far East. Rag paper, made from linen and cotton, was pulped in water-powered mills, where large stone hammers crushed the fibers into slurry. This pulp was then spread across fine mesh screens, drained, pressed, and dried, creating sheets of varying textures and thickness. Sativa's paper was admired across the Mediterranean. It was said to be strong yet pliable, suitable for both writing and illumination. From this city, papermaking spread to other parts of Spain, including Toledo, Seville, and Granada. The Islamic artisans of Iberia, many of them mudajas, Muslims living under Christian rule, passed on their skills to local Christian workers, who continued the craft even after the Reconquista advanced. By the 13th century, paper mills operated in both Muslim and Christian territories, and the industry took root in the Iberian Peninsula in a lasting way. Thus, from the hands of Moorish craftsmen, the gift of papermaking began its journey into the heart of Europe. Rise of paper mills in Italy and France. By the late 13th and early 14th centuries, paper mills began to appear beyond the Pyrenees. Italy was among the first European regions to adopt papermaking on a significant scale. In particular, the town of Fabriano, nestled in the rolling hills of the Marche region, became the cradle of Italian papermaking. The artisans of Fabriano did not merely imitate Moorish techniques, they improved upon them. They introduced watermarks, symbols embedded in the paper itself, which identified the maker and offered a mark of quality. They also perfected gelatin sizing, which made the paper less absorbent and more durable. These refinements gave Italian paper a distinct and superior character. From Fabriano, the industry spread to other parts of the Italian peninsula, to Amalfi, Florence, and Venice, where paper became essential to trade, banking, and diplomacy. Contracts, ledgers, and letters flowed freely on sheets that bore the mark of Italian ingenuity. Meanwhile, in France, papermaking was established in the south, particularly in Troyes and Montpellier, regions with strong ties to Mediterranean trade. Here too, the industry grew steadily, supported by merchants, scribes, and educators who needed a reliable medium for their expanding needs. By the dawn of the 15th century, Europe had become a continent of paper, not yet entirely, but increasingly so. Mills dotted the rivers, their wheels turning with the rhythm of progress. Impact of the printing press on paper demand. Then came a revolution, silent yet seismic. In the middle of the 15th century, in the bustling city of Mainz, a man named Johannes Gutenberg unveiled a device that would forever change the destiny of paper, the printing press. This invention, with its movable type and mechanical precision, allowed books to be produced not by hand, but by machine. What once took months to copy could now be printed in days. The implications were staggering. But this revolution could not succeed without paper. Gutenberg's press required a medium that could withstand the pressure of the type blocks, absorb ink without smearing, and stack evenly for binding. Parchment, with its irregularities and cost, was ill-suited. Paper, with its smooth surface and affordability, was ideal. The demand for paper soared. Printing houses sprang up across Europe, in Nuremberg, Venice, Paris, and London, and each required mountains of paper for their presses. New mills were built to meet the need. The papermaker became as vital as the printer. Paper, once viewed with suspicion, was now essential to Europe's most transformative innovation. Gutenberg and the printing revolution. Gutenberg's own 42-line Bible, printed around 1455, was a marvel of technology and craftsmanship. Though some copies were printed on parchment, the majority were on paper, thick, durable, and skillfully made. This Bible, majestic and weighty, symbolized not only a new way of producing books but a new way of spreading knowledge. The written word was no longer confined to cloisters and courts. Now, it could reach the merchant, the scholar, the preacher, and the peasant. Printing multiplied the written word 1,000-fold. Paper gave it wings. Together, they launched Europe into the modern era. Paper versus parchment, a cultural shift. As printing advanced, the cultural dominance of parchment began to wane. It did not vanish overnight. Many legal and ecclesiastical documents continued to be penned on vellum well into the 16th century. Some printers even offered luxury editions on parchment for noble patrons. But for the vast majority, paper became the new norm. It was cheaper, faster, and more practical. Scribes who once illuminated manuscripts by candlelight now found themselves unemployed or repurposed as typesetters. Monasteries that once kept vast stocks of calfskin now stocked paper instead. The transition marked more than a material change. It signified a democratization of knowledge. Paper, born in the East, had become the lifeblood of the West's intellectual awakening. Paper in Renaissance art and literature. The Renaissance, that great in politics, too, paper enabled new forms of governance. Decrees, laws, and constitutions could be copied and distributed. Public opinion, once an abstraction, became a force, expressed through broadsheets, pamphlets, and books. Thus, from quiet origins in Chinese forests and Tang workshops, paper had traveled across continents, crossed cultures, survived skepticism, and transformed civilization. It now lay in the hands of revolutionaries, reformers, poets, and kings. And its journey was far from over. Industrialization and mass production. Invention of the Fourdrinier machine. As the 18th century waned and the dawn of the 19th century crept gently upon the world, the quiet art of papermaking, once performed by hand in slow, deliberate motions, stood on the brink of transformation. For centuries, paper had been made much the same way, sheet by sheet, with careful dipping of molds into pulp, pressing, and drying. This method, though elegant, could no longer satisfy the ever-swelling appetite of an industrializing world. A new century required a new invention. And so it was that the Fordrinier machine was born. The story begins in England, a land already humming with mills and machinery, where the Industrial Revolution had taken firm root. Two brothers, Henry and Seely Fordrinier, stationers by trade and visionaries by inclination, sought to modernize the paper trade. They invested heavily in a new design, one that could produce paper not in single sheets, but in a continuous roll. The concept itself was not entirely new. A Frenchman named Louis-Nicolas Robert had proposed a similar idea, but it was in the Fordriniers' hands that the concept came to full fruition. Their machine, first successfully operated around 1803, was a marvel of gears, rollers, wires, and felts. A liquid slurry of pulp was poured onto a moving mesh belt, the wire, which allowed water to drain away as the sheet traveled forward. Further down the line, pressing and drying mechanisms transformed the wet pulp into a continuous, smooth, and finished roll of paper. The implications were immense. No longer constrained by the manual pace of the VAT man, the coucher, and the layer, the paper mill could now produce in hours what once took days. The Fordrinier machine represented a turning point, a mechanical leap that would ripple outward through every industry touched by the written word. Though initially expensive and plagued with difficulties, the machine would go on to revolutionize paper production. Across Britain, France, and soon America, mills would adopt the Fordrinier system. Paper was no longer a product of the artisan's bench. It had become the child of industry. Mechanization of pulping and drying. While the Fordrinier machine transformed the forming of paper, equal advances were necessary in the preparation of pulp itself. In the age-old method, fibers were beaten by water-powered hammers, laboriously and unevenly. This, too, would be replaced by machinery, most notably the introduction of the Hollander beater, an innovation from the Netherlands in the late 17th century but widely adopted during the industrial era. The Hollander beater used a rotating drum fitted with metal blades to macerate rags or fibers into pulp. It allowed for a more consistent and efficient process, capable of producing far greater volumes of pulp than traditional stamping mills. When paired with continuous papermaking machines, this advancement ensured that supply could meet demand. Drying, too, evolved. In earlier times, sheets of paper were hung upon ropes or laid upon felt in warm rooms, drying slowly in the ambient air. But with the speed of continuous production, such methods were impractical. The industrial mill now employed heated drying cylinders, great rotating drums of iron or copper, heated by steam, over which the wet paper passed in long, winding paths. In this manner, drying became uniform, rapid, and scalable. Every step, from pulping to pressing to drying, was being transformed. Mechanization reduced the need for skilled labor and dramatically increased output. It also introduced new challenges, maintenance, quality control, and safety hazards unknown to the old handmade process. Still, the momentum was irreversible. The world had entered a new epoch of papermaking, one in which steam and steel played as great a role as water and fiber. Transition from rags to wood pulp. One of the most profound shifts in the history of papermaking was the transition from rags to wood pulp as the primary raw material. For centuries, the pulp that formed paper had come from textile waste. Linen and cotton rags collected by ragpickers, sorted, cleaned, and beaten into slurry. But as demand grew, especially with the rise of newspapers, books, and bureaucracy, the supply of rags proved inadequate. By the mid-19th century, attention turned to an abundant and renewable resource, wood. The forests of Europe and North America offered vast reserves of timber, and inventors devised methods to convert this into usable fiber. Two primary techniques emerged: mechanical pulping, in which wood was ground down into fibers using grindstones, and chemical pulping, where wood chips were cooked with chemicals to dissolve lignin and leave behind cellulose. Mechanical pulp was cheap and produced bright, bulky paper, though it aged poorly. Chemical pulps, such as the sulfite and later craft processes, produced the role of paper in newspapers and advertising. Nowhere was the transformation more visible than in the realm of print media. The 19th century saw the birth of the modern newspaper, a daily organ of news, opinion, and entertainment, printed on cheap paper and sold for pennies to a mass audience. These newspapers, often referred to as the penny press, relied entirely on the availability of inexpensive paper made from wood pulp. Publishers such as Joseph Pulitzer and William Randolph Hearst in the United States, and their counterparts in London and Paris, used paper to build media empires. Their newspapers demanded tens of thousands of copies each day, printed rapidly and distributed widely. The presses ran day and night. Without industrial papermaking, such operations would have been inconceivable. Simultaneously, paper became the medium of advertising. Posters adorned walls, leaflets were handed out on corners, catalogs and circulars arrived in the mail. The language of commerce was written on paper. Businesses depended on it to inform, persuade, and attract. Thus, paper became not only a vessel for thought and art, but also a tool of business and persuasion, as vital to the market economy as coin or contract. Education reform and demand for affordable paper. The 19th century also witnessed sweeping education reforms, particularly in industrialized nations. As governments and reformers pushed for universal primary education, the need for affordable learning materials became acute. Textbooks, copybooks, slates, and examination papers all required vast quantities of cheap, usable paper. And so, the rise of public schooling drove an even greater demand for mass-produced paper. Children learned to read and write on paper. Teachers kept registers, marked assignments, and prepared lessons on paper. Administrators recorded attendance and budgets on paper. The schoolhouse, like the pressroom, became a citadel of pulp and ink. In this way, paper helped build a more literate society. It brought the tools of learning within reach of millions. And it gave voice to the aspirations of a new age, one that valued knowledge, self-improvement, and civic engagement. Industrial paper mills in Europe and America. The rise of industrial paper mills reshaped entire landscapes. Along the rivers of New England, the Great Lakes, and the Appalachian foothills, massive mills were constructed, powered by water wheels, then steam engines, and later electricity. In Europe, the Rhine, the Seine, and the Thames saw similar developments. Mills employed thousands of workers, men to haul logs, women to sort rags, engineers to tend the machines, clerks to manage accounts. Companies like International Paper and Kimberly-Clark in the United States, or Stora Enso and UPM in Scandinavia, began to dominate the industry. These enterprises brought scale, consistency, and market reach. But they also brought new challenges: industrial labor disputes, environmental degradation, and the displacement of older artisanal traditions. Still, for better or worse, the industrial paper mill became a defining feature of the modern age, a monument to mechanized ingenuity. Paper as a commodity in global trade. By the late 19th century, paper had become a global commodity. Ships carried wood pulp from the forests of Canada to the mills of England. Finished paper traveled from the presses of New York to the markets of Buenos Aires. Tariffs were levied on paper goods. Trade agreements included clauses about pulpwood. And international exhibitions showcased the latest in paper technology, from coated stock to carbon paper, wallpaper to wrapping sheets. Paper was now embedded in the rhythms of global trade. It was bought and sold in markets, subject to speculation and boom and bust cycles. It was no longer merely a cultural artifact. It was an economic force. Standardization of paper sizes and types. To keep pace with growing complexity, the industry moved toward standardization. In the early 20th century, various national and international bodies began to define standard paper sizes, such as the ISO A-series still used today. Printers could now design layouts that fit universally accepted dimensions. Manufacturers could tailor machines to specific sheet sizes. Efficiency improved, waste diminished, and compatibility across borders increased. Likewise, types of paper were standardized, echo through the halls of learning. Though we live in an era of glowing screens and rapid electronic messaging, paper remains a constant companion in the sphere of education. It clings to the chalkboard's side in the form of student essays and worksheets. It sits beneath pen and pencil as children practice their letters and numbers, and it fills binders, folders, and desks with the steady, silent accumulation of knowledge. Throughout the 20th century and well into the 21st, paper has been both the vessel and the vehicle for instruction. In primary schools, Exercise books line shelves in neat stacks, their covers adorned with cheerful colors and ruled pages inviting learning. In secondary schools, note-taking still flourishes with ballpoint pens across lined paper. And in the hallowed lecture halls of universities, where knowledge is passed down through generations, students often choose paper notebooks over digital alternatives, preferring the tactile comfort and permanence of ink on a physical page. Communication, too, continues to lean upon paper's familiar form. Letters, once the lifeblood of long-distance correspondence, may now be less frequent, but they have not vanished. The handwritten note, the mailed invitation, the thank you card, all retain a charm that no electronic message can quite replicate. Paper, in this role, is more than mere medium. It is messenger, bearing with it a sense of care, intentionality, and human presence. Thus, even in our modern era, paper remains deeply embedded in how we learn, connect, and express ourselves, reminding us that not all traditions fade with time. Legal, governmental, and financial use. Beyond the classroom and the mailbox, paper resides in the somber corridors of government buildings, courtrooms, and financial institutions. It occupies filing cabinets and locked drawers, safes and strongboxes, serving as the custodian of laws, identities, and contracts. Legal documents, the cornerstone of justice and order, are inscribed on paper with solemn permanence. Deeds to property, wills and testaments, court orders, and treaties are often still recorded on printed or written paper. The signature scrawled in ink across a contract remains a gesture of binding intent, backed by centuries of tradition and legal precedent. In governmental offices, paper serves as the official record of citizenship, tax filings, census data, and legislation. Passports, birth certificates, and national identity cards often still rely on paper forms, sometimes enhanced with watermarks, holograms, and microprinting for security. In times of crisis or conflict, it is often these paper documents that determine one's safety, mobility, and rights. Finance, too, has long depended on paper. Checks, banknotes, bonds, and ledgers have defined the economic systems of nations for generations. Though electronic banking now dominates, paper still plays a crucial role in receipts, invoices, printed statements, and physical evidence of transactions. In all these domains, the use of paper is not merely habitual, it is a matter of trust. The tangible nature of a document, its resistance to manipulation and deletion, continues to lend it an authority and reliability that the ephemeral nature of digital records cannot always match. Greeting cards, calendars, and everyday items. In daily life, the presence of paper extends into moments of joy, celebration, and routine. Greeting cards, with their colorful designs and heartfelt messages, continue to mark birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays with a personal touch that digital substitutes seldom replicate. Whether humorous or poignant, a card received in the mail or handed across the table brings with it a tangible connection, a memento that can be displayed on a mantle or tucked away for years to come. Calendars, too, remain faithful companions on walls and desks. While digital calendars offer alerts and automation, the visual satisfaction of flipping a page to reveal a new month, or crossing out a day with a pen, maintains a timeless appeal. Wall calendars adorned with photographs of nature, art, or beloved pets serve both function and form, blending utility with gentle decoration. Paper is also found in notebooks, shopping lists, receipts, and packaging, mundane yet essential. It wraps our sandwiches, lines our drawers, and covers our textbooks. It wipes our faces and holds our to-do lists. It is the medium of the everyday, taken for granted and yet deeply integrated into the rhythms of ordinary life. Though these uses may seem small, they underscore paper's continued relevance. Its simplicity, availability, and versatility make it a quiet constant in homes, offices, and lives across the world. Newspapers, magazines, and the print industry. Though challenged by the rise of digital media, the print industry endures as a monument to paper's enduring legacy. Newspapers, printed daily or weekly, continue to arrive on doorsteps and newsstands, their pages filled with headlines, columns, obituaries, puzzles, and photographs. There is something ceremonial in the act of opening a fresh newspaper, folding it neatly, and reading its contents over a cup of morning tea. Magazines offer glossy, colorful worlds in bound volumes, covering everything from fashion and food to science and politics. Their tactile presence in waiting rooms, libraries, and bookstores speaks to their continued popularity. Whether flipped through idly or read with attention, the magazine's appeal lies as much in its design and feel as in its content. Books, too, remain central to the print industry. While ebooks offer convenience, many readers still cherish the weight of a printed volume, the whisper of pages turning, the scent of ink and paper. Libraries, bookstores, and personal shelves testify to the enduring affection for the printed word. Despite predictions of obsolescence, the print industry has adapted. Niche publications, limited editions, and high-quality prints have found loyal audiences. And even as major newspapers and magazines expand online, their print versions retain a certain gravitas and authenticity. Thus, paper endures not just as a practical tool, but as a medium of culture, reflection. Thus, paper, long associated with communication and record-keeping, has carved out a renewed role in wrapping, enclosing, and presenting the goods of modern commerce. Artistic uses, origami, stationery, and sketchbooks. Beyond its practical uses, paper remains a canvas for human creativity. In the delicate folds of origami, paper transforms into birds, flowers, and geometric wonders. This Japanese art form, centuries old, continues to evolve in the hands of contemporary artists, mathematicians, and hobbyists around the world. Stationery, with its fine textures and graceful designs, offers a tactile pleasure in the act of writing. Personalized letterheads, hand-pressed paper, embossed note cards, these are expressions of taste and refinement. To write a letter on such paper is not just to communicate, but to offer a piece of oneself. Sketchbooks, journals, and notebooks serve artists and thinkers alike. A blank page invites possibility of a drawing, a poem, a plan, or a dream. The feel of graphite on rough paper, or ink soaking into smooth vellum, forms a sensory bond between creator and medium. In studios, classrooms, and quiet corners of the world, paper remains the silent partner of artistic expression. Its surface bears the marks of imagination, emotion, and vision, capturing fleeting thoughts in a form that endures. Innovations, thermal paper, coated paper, and more. As technology advances, so too does paper itself. No longer limited to its traditional forms, modern innovations have yielded specialized papers designed for specific tasks. Thermal paper, used in receipts and ticketing, reacts to heat rather than ink, allowing for fast, efficient printing in point-of-sale systems. Coated papers, with glossy or matte finishes, enhance image reproduction in magazines, brochures, and photo prints. There are also water-resistant papers, tear-proof sheets, and synthetic blends that combine the look of paper with the resilience of plastic. In laboratories and industries, specialized papers filter chemicals, measure reactions, or serve as components in electronics. These innovations demonstrate paper's adaptability. Even as new materials and methods emerge, paper evolves, meeting new needs with new formulations, preserving its place in the modern world. Paper in bureaucracy and record-keeping. In the vast architecture of modern governance and organization, paper remains the backbone of bureaucracy. Forms, applications, permits, and certifications are often still issued and filed on paper, despite digital alternatives. Hospitals keep paper charts. Schools maintain paper transcripts. Courts hold paper dockets. Offices, public and private, still rely on printed reports, meeting minutes, and policy documents. The preference for paper in record-keeping arises not only from habit, but from paper's durability and reliability. It requires no electricity to read. It cannot be hacked. It can be filed, indexed, annotated, and retrieved with ease. Though the dream of a paperless office has lingered for decades, reality has proven more nuanced. For every new digital database, there remains a paper backup. For every electronic form, a printed version is often required. Paper, in this context, represents stability. It is the tangible evidence of decisions, transactions, and histories. Paper in the age of digital transition. The digital revolution has brought profound changes to how we communicate, learn, and do business. Yet rather than eliminating paper, it has redefined its role. Emails and cloud storage may have reduced the volume of correspondence and filing, but they have also highlighted the unique qualities of paper. Where digital content is fleeting, paper offers permanence. Where screens fatigue the eyes, paper offers comfort. Where files vanish in a click, paper endures in the drawer or on the shelf. The coexistence of digital and paper systems is now the norm. E-books thrive, yet printed books hold steady. PDFs are shared, but often printed for annotation. Online forms exist, but require wet signatures on printed versions. In education, hybrid models combine tablets with notebooks. In offices, digital archives supplement physical ones. In personal life, handwritten journals coexist with blogs and posts. This transitional era has not erased paper, it has refined it, preserving its place. Teeming with biodiversity, were cleared to make way for timber plantations. These managed stands of fast-growing trees, often species like pine, spruce, and eucalyptus, replaced the diverse ecosystems with monocultures. While more efficient for production, such monocultures support far less biodiversity and disrupt natural cycles that have existed for millennia. The process of pulping, where wood is mechanically or chemically broken down into fibers, places additional stress on the environment. It is not merely the act of cutting trees that harms ecosystems, but the industrial processes that follow, releasing byproducts and altering the landscape. Forest soils are often compacted or eroded, and delicate root networks are destroyed, reducing the ability of these environments to recover naturally. And so, from ancient groves to modern plantations, the story of paper begins in the quiet groves of the Earth's lungs, where the rustling leaves and chirping birds have, over time, given way to the whirring of saws and the hum of machinery. Water and chemical use in papermaking. The production of paper, though seemingly simple, is a surprisingly thirsty and chemically intensive process. In every sheet of crisp white paper lies a hidden story of water drawn from rivers, chemicals stirred in great vats, and vast facilities working tirelessly to transform fiber into form. Water is essential throughout the papermaking journey. It is used to transport and separate fibers, to remove impurities, and to rinse, wash, and press the pulp. For every ton of paper produced, thousands of gallons of water may be consumed. And not all of this water is returned clean to the ecosystem. In many regions, pulp and paper mills discharge wastewater that contains residues of bleaching agents, dyes, and other chemicals. One of the more contentious substances used in traditional papermaking is chlorine, often employed in the bleaching process to produce bright white paper. Though effective, chlorine compounds can react with organic material in the pulp to form dioxins and other persistent pollutants, substances that can remain in the environment for years and accumulate in living organisms. Even as regulations have tightened and technologies improved, the environmental legacy of earlier practices lingers in certain waterways and soils. The image of the idyllic countryside paper mill, with its water wheel turning in a crystal-clear stream, gives way to a more complicated reality, one where balance must be constantly sought between production needs and ecological health. And so, the very water that gives life to forests and nourishes communities also plays an unseen role in the making of paper, tying the industry to the planet's most vital resource in ways both practical and profound. Waste and recycling challenges. After a paper's purpose is served, whether as a letter, a newspaper, or a cardboard box, it enters the final stage of its journey. For many years, that journey ended in landfills or incinerators. The sheer volume of discarded paper, especially in industrialized nations, once made up a significant portion of municipal waste streams, filling garbage bins and waste stations with the remains of reading, learning, wrapping, and packing. Recycling, while a noble and increasingly necessary endeavor, brings its own complexities. The process of collecting, sorting, derinking, and reprocessing paper is labor-intensive and not always economically viable. Contaminants such as food residue, plastic linings, or mixed materials can render batches of paper unrecyclable. Furthermore, paper fibers degrade with each recycling cycle. After several rounds, the fibers become too short to bind together effectively, reducing their quality and requiring blending with virgin pulp. There are also logistical hurdles. Not all regions have adequate infrastructure for large-scale paper recycling. In some places, recycled paper must be shipped long distances, diminishing the environmental gains of recycling. Moreover, certain types of paper, such as thermal paper from receipts or wax-coated products, are rarely recycled due to the technical difficulties they present. Despite these challenges, progress has been made. Municipal recycling programs, environmental education, and industry investments have increased the percentage of paper that finds a second life. Yet, the journey is far from over. For paper to be truly sustainable, every link in its life cycle, from production to disposal, must be carefully considered and improved upon. Efforts toward sustainable paper. In response to growing environmental awareness, efforts toward more sustainable papermaking have emerged across the globe. These endeavors take many forms, from the reforestation of harvested areas to the development of alternative fibers that place less strain on forests. One of the most important strategies is the practice of sustainable forestry. Here, timber is harvested under careful management that seeks to preserve the health and biodiversity of forest ecosystems. Replanting trees, maintaining wildlife corridors, and protecting old-growth areas are all key components of this approach. Certification systems such as those offered by the Forest Stewardship Council, FSC, encourage these responsible practices, allowing consumers to choose paper products that come from well-managed sources. In the mills themselves, advances in closed-loop water systems and reduced chemical usage help mitigate pollution. Cleaner pulping techniques, such as oxygen delignification or totally chlorine-free bleaching, have gained ground, reducing the harmful byproducts released into the environment. Research has also turned to finding new materials for paper. Agricultural residues like wheat straw, sugarcane bagasse, and even banana fiber have been explored as potential sources of pulp, offering alternatives to wood that make use of waste from other industries. In all these areas, sustainability is no longer an abstract goal, but a concrete part of the papermaking process. Though the road is long and full of challenges, the industry is slowly bending toward practices that honor the natural world from which it draws its resources. Key rise of recycled paper products, certifications, and eco-labeling. In a world increasingly attuned to environmental issues, certifications and eco-labels have become powerful tools in guiding consumer choices. These marks, quietly printed on the backs of notebooks, cartons, and paper reams, tell stories of origin, process, and intent. The Forest Stewardship Council, FSC, label is among the most recognized. It indicates that the paper originates from responsibly managed forests that protect biodiversity, workers' rights, and indigenous communities. Similarly, the Program for the Endorsement of Forest Certification, PEFC, supports sustainable forest management through independent third-party certification. Other labels speak to recycled content. Products may display the Mobius loop symbol, indicating the percentage of recycled material used. There are also certifications for chlorine-free processing, reduced carbon footprints, and the use of renewable energy during production. Eco-labels empower consumers to make informed choices, transforming everyday purchases into acts of environmental responsibility. They also encourage transparency and accountability within the paper industry, creating incentives for sustainable practices at every stage, from forest to factory to final product. In this way, the quiet presence of a certification symbol becomes a bridge between producer and consumer, reminding us that even the most ordinary item, a sheet of paper, carries with it a chain of decisions that stretch far beyond the moment it is used. Paper versus digital, environmental trade-offs. In the age of digital transformation, a quiet debate unfolds beneath the glow of our screens and the rustle of printed pages. At first glance, replacing paper with digital devices seems the logical step toward environmental sustainability. After all, emails save envelopes, e-books replace printed volumes, and online news displaces broadsheets. Yet, the trade-offs between paper and digital are more nuanced than they first appear. Paper, as we have seen, comes at the cost of trees, water, energy, and often chemical treatment. The production chain is long and resource-intensive, and disposal carries its own environmental burdens. Yet, paper is biodegradable, recyclable, and in many cases renewable, particularly when managed under sustainable forestry practices. A well-made book or document can last centuries with no need for electricity or rare minerals. Digital devices, while freeing us from reliance on paper, carry a hidden ecological footprint. The manufacture of tablets, smartphones, and computers requires rare earth metals, plastic components, and global supply chains that span continents. The mining for these materials, often concentrated in ecologically sensitive regions, leads to habitat destruction, water pollution, and human rights concerns. Furthermore, the energy required to power devices and data centers contributes significantly to global emissions. Electronic waste, too, presents a challenge. Unlike a sheet of paper that decomposes in a matter of months, electronic devices can linger in landfills for decades, leaching harmful substances into the soil. Recycling of e-waste remains limited and complex. Thus, the choice between paper and digital is not a simple equation of good versus bad. It is a delicate balancing act, shaped by how each medium is used, reused, and disposed of. In some contexts, going digital reduces waste. In others, thoughtful paper use, especially recycled and sustainably sourced, may offer a lighter ecological touch. Ultimately, the future may not lie in abandoning one for the other, but in blending both with mindfulness, moderation, and care for the broader ecosystem in which they exist. Innovations in eco-friendly paper. Necessity, as they say, is the mother of invention. In response to mounting environmental concerns, scientists, entrepreneurs, and artisans around the world have turned their attention to reimagining paper itself, not merely how it's used, but how it's made. One promising development lies in alternative fibers. Traditional wood pulp is being supplemented, or even replaced, by agricultural waste products such as wheat straw, sugarcane bagasse, cotton linters, and even elephant dung. These materials, once discarded, are now finding new life as raw materials for pulp. Their use not only reduces the demand for timber but also adds value to byproducts that might otherwise contribute to waste streams. In Japan, papermakers continue to produce traditional washi from the inner bark of the kozo plant, offering a time-honored example of sustainable, low-impact papermaking. Elsewhere, stone paper, made from calcium carbonate and a small amount of resin, offers a waterless production process and boasts durability and resistance to tearing. Some innovators are experimenting with algae-based papers, ideal for absorbing pollutants and preventing harmful algal blooms from spreading. Others are working with mushroom mycelium, hemp, or kenaf, looking for minimalism, too, plays its part. The modern aesthetic, often associated with clarity, space, and simplicity, finds harmony in decluttering, reducing the need for printed materials, notepads, and extraneous packaging. Reusable notebooks, digital pens, and cloud storage services further support this shift. At the same time, a sense of intentionality has begun to infuse the use of paper. A handwritten letter becomes more meaningful precisely because it is rare. A printed photograph, chosen and framed, stands out in a world flooded with digital images. Journals and sketchbooks become cherished objects, symbols of thoughtfulness in an era of speed. Cultural institutions and artists also participate in this evolution, encouraging sustainable printing, reduced print runs, and the careful curation of printed materials. The paperless movement is not about deprivation, but discernment, using paper where it adds value, and foregoing it where it does not. And so, as habits change and priorities shift, paper finds itself not discarded, but transformed from a ubiquitous tool of consumption to a cherished medium of intention and expression. The future of sustainable paper. As we gaze toward the horizon, the future of paper emerges not as a relic of the past, but as a medium reshaped by consciousness, innovation, and care. The challenges are real: deforestation, pollution, waste, but so too is the will to meet them with new approaches. Sustainable paper production may become increasingly localized, with regional mills using local fibers to reduce transportation impacts. New circular systems may rise, where waste paper is seamlessly reabsorbed into the production stream, minimizing both input and output. Governments may tighten regulations and offer incentives for cleaner technologies, while consumers continue to demand transparency and responsibility. Digital technologies, rather than erasing paper, may help refine its role, preserving it for moments of permanence, artistry, or tactile connection. Schools may blend e-learning with printed materials, creating hybrid environments that honor both efficiency and tradition. And perhaps most importantly, the story of paper, so long taken for granted, will be better understood. Education around its origins, impacts, and alternatives will empower individuals to make informed choices. A single notebook will no longer be anonymous, but part of a chain that links forests, rivers, mills, hands, and hearts. In this envisioned future, paper becomes not just a product, but a reflection of human values. It symbolizes a delicate balance between need and nature, between utility and beauty. And if treated with respect, it will remain a companion to learning, creativity, and communication for generations to come. Paper in art, culture, and identity. The story of paper has long been intertwined with more than the practical needs of communication and record keeping. Beyond its functional uses in law, religion, and administration, paper has also been a vessel for the human spirit, for expression, beauty, memory, and identity. Across centuries and continents, individuals and communities have shaped and been shaped by their relationship to paper, making it not just a material but a cultural and emotional medium. In this chapter, we explore paper's role in the arts and in the deep, often quiet dimensions of personal and collective life. Manuscript illumination and medieval books. In the hushed silence of medieval scriptoriums, a special kind of alchemy unfolded. Here, under the flickering light of candles, monks and scribes transformed humble sheets of parchment and later paper into radiant vessels of divine and scholarly illumination. Manuscript illumination, a centuries-old practice of adorning text with decorative borders, initials, and miniature illustrations, reached its height during the Middle Ages, and paper slowly became a vital part of this tradition. Though parchment remained the dominant substrate for many illuminated manuscripts in the earlier medieval period, the introduction and increasing availability of paper provided a more flexible and affordable alternative. Particularly in later centuries, as paper mills flourished in southern Europe, this lighter, more absorbent material offered scribes new possibilities. It took ink more easily than parchment and allowed for quicker and more efficient writing and decoration. Manuscript illuminators, often members of monastic communities, approached their work with a reverence that transformed each page into a sacred space. The page becomes a stage for rhythm, flow, and feeling, a place where the visible and the invisible meet. In East Asia, where brush calligraphy is considered one of the highest artistic achievements, the qualities of paper are of critical importance. Traditional Chinese and Japanese calligraphers prize paper that is both absorbent and durable, allowing for variations in line thickness and ink saturation. Rice paper, or xianji, with its soft surface and subtle texture, responds intimately to the pressure and speed of the brush, capturing the calligrapher's mood, energy, and intention. In Islamic culture, calligraphy evolved as both an aesthetic and spiritual practice. Because depictions of living beings were discouraged in religious art, the written word became the primary channel for artistic devotion. Verses from the Quran were rendered with breathtaking elegance, often in scripts such as Kufic or Naskh, on beautifully prepared sheets of paper. The act of writing was an act of reverence, and the paper itself was treated with great respect. In the West, the poetic tradition also found a natural home on paper. From troubadours and court poets to romantic scribes and modern lyricists, paper preserved the delicate dance of verse. Sonnets, elegies, and haikus all found refuge in the blankness of the page, a space in which thoughts could unfold and emotions could take shape. The intimacy of handwriting, the unique curve of each letter, the placement of words upon a page, all contribute to the expressive power of written poetry and calligraphy. Paper, in these contexts, is not merely a surface but a participant, responding to the touch of ink and brush, echoing the cadence of voice and breath. Paper in visual arts, collage, printmaking, and more. Beyond the written word, paper has inspired visual artists to cut, fold, glue, press, and mold it into countless forms. In disciplines such as collage, printmaking, paper cutting, and sculpture, artists have discovered in paper a medium of extraordinary versatility and emotional resonance. Printmaking, one of the earliest reproductive art techniques, depends on paper's ability to receive impressions. Whether using woodcuts, etchings, engravings, or lithographs, artists have long relied on high-quality papers to capture fine detail and nuance. The invention of paper made printmaking not only possible but widely accessible, enabling artists to distribute their work to broader audiences. In the 20th century, collage emerged as a dynamic art form, with artists like Pablo Picasso and Henri Matisse incorporating torn paper, newspaper clippings, and cutouts into their compositions. Paper became both material and message, layering textures, meanings, and references in rich, playful assemblages. Paper cutting traditions flourish in many cultures, from the intricate Scherenschnitt of Switzerland to the vibrant papel picadou of Mexico. With just a blade and a steady hand, artists craft astonishingly delicate designs, often used in ceremonial or festive contexts. Some contemporary artists create entire sculptures out of paper, pushing the boundaries of what this humble material can achieve. From towering installations to lifelike botanical replicas, paper lends itself to illusion and transformation, evoking both fragility and resilience. In the hands of artists, paper becomes more than substrate. It becomes substance, capable of evoking lightness or solidity, intimacy or spectacle. It is a medium of memory, gesture, and form, forever open to reinvention. Handmade paper traditions around the world. Even in an age of machines and mass production, the art of handmade paper endures. Across the world, communities continue to produce paper using traditional methods passed down through generations, methods that honor both craft and place, yielding sheets that are as beautiful as they are functional. In Nepal, the locta plant grows on the steep Himalayan slopes. For centuries, its bark has been harvested sustainably, soaked, pounded, and dried to create a resilient, textured paper used in official documents, religious texts, and artistic applications. Locta paper, with its earthy tones and fibrous charm, is celebrated both locally and internationally. In Bhutan, handmade paper called desho plays a central role in spiritual life, used for prayer flags, scriptures, and ritual objects. Its production, steeped in cultural meaning, is a meditative process, often carried out in monastic communities. In India, artisans continue to craft paper from cotton rags using techniques revived during the Khadi movement. This paper, known for its strength and elegance, symbolizes self-reliance and sustainable industry, echoing Gandhi's vision of village-based economies. In Japan, the making of washi remains a revered tradition. Using fibers from the kozo, mitsumata, or gampai plants, papermakers beat, strain, and dry the pulp to create sheets that are soft yet strong, translucent yet sturdy. Washi is used in everything from shoji screens and clothing to art and restoration work. These handmade papers carry the imprint. Festivals involve launching paper-covered frames into the sky or floating them on water, blending paper, fire, and air in rituals of release and gratitude. In India, colorful paper streamers and decorations mark weddings, festivals, and religious observances. In Mexico, papel picadou, paper banners cut with exquisite designs, flutter above Day of the Dead altars and town plazas, evoking both celebration and remembrance. In Japan and Korea, traditional kite festivals involve the flying of massive, hand-painted paper kites. These kites often depict historical figures, animals, or symbols of good fortune and are flown with skill and ceremony. Even in the Western world, paper finds its place in festivities, from crepe paper streamers at birthdays to Christmas wrapping, Valentine's cards, and confetti. These decorations, though often short-lived, add color, texture, and joy to our gatherings, embodying the spirit of transience and renewal. In these traditions, paper is not merely decoration. It is an active participant in communal joy, symbolic expression, and the marking of time and transition. Journals, diaries, and personal reflection. In the quiet corners of bedrooms, beneath flickering candlelight or soft lamplight, countless individuals have turned to paper as a confidant, a mirror, and a companion to solitude. The journal and the diary, though often private and modest, hold a profound place in the cultural history of paper. These personal writings transform the blank page into a sanctuary for thoughts, feelings, dreams, and confessions. Long before the age of social media and instant communication, people recorded their inner lives with pen in hand. Paper allowed them a means of reflection, where moments of joy, grief, wonder, and doubt could be captured with honesty and care. The texture of the paper, the sound of the pen, the act of writing itself, all contributed to the contemplative nature of the process. The diaries of historical figures, from Anne Frank to Samuel Pepys, from S.E.I. Schnagen in ancient Japan to Virginia Woolf, offer us not just insights into events but windows into the human spirit. These paper-bound musings have outlived their authors, carrying forward their voices in ways both intimate and universal. Even for those whose writings were never meant to be shared, the journal provided a form of quiet therapy, a conversation with the self. Whether kept in neat volumes with leather covers or in tattered notebooks with scribbled margins, journals became time capsules, repositories of memory, evidence of existence, and testimony to the inner life. Paper, in these settings, serves as a still and non-judgmental listener. It receives without interruption, records without opinion. It is present without being invasive. In this way, it becomes more than a medium. It becomes a partner in solitude, an archive of identity. Paper in folklore, rituals, and myth. Throughout the world, paper has played an essential role not just in practical life or personal expression but in the sacred, symbolic, and mythical dimensions of culture. Paper takes on spiritual resonance in rituals, is imbued with meaning in folklore, and becomes an agent in the transmission of myths and ancestral wisdom. In many East Asian traditions, paper is believed to be a bridge between the earthly and the spiritual realms. During the Qingming festival in China, families burn paper offerings, replicas of money, goods, or homes, to honor their ancestors. The smoke is thought to carry these offerings into the afterlife, enabling care across the veil between worlds. Similarly, paper effigies and ritual documents are used in Taoist and Buddhist ceremonies to protect, guide, or appease spirits. In Japanese Shinto shrines, strips of white paper, known as shoda, hang from sacred ropes and structures. Their zigzag shapes are thought to ward off evil spirits and mark spaces as spiritually pure. These simple pieces of paper serve as symbols of divine presence and protection. In the West, folklore and magical traditions have also employed paper in symbolic ways. Written charms, blessings, or curses were inscribed on paper and hidden, burned, or placed under thresholds. Folk tales, once passed orally, began to be transcribed onto paper, giving them permanence and allowing them to travel far from their places of origin. In South America, paper figures and masks are crafted for festivals that blend indigenous customs with colonial Catholic rituals. The vibrancy of these paper creations speaks to the layered and evolving nature of cultural identity. Whether as a conduit to the divine, a bearer of tradition, or a talisman of power, paper has long served in ritual and myth not as an inert object but as an active participant in the shaping of meaning. Scrapbooking, letter writing, and keepsakes. Among the most tender and nostalgic uses of paper are those that revolve around memory, connection, and sentiment. Scrapbooking, letter writing, and the keeping of paper mementos allow individuals to preserve the threads of their lives and relationships with both creativity and love. Scrapbooks, with their colorful pages and tactile assemblages, are more than mere collections. They are curated expressions of experience. Photographs, ticket stubs, pressed flowers, clippings, and handwritten notes come together to tell a story that is both deeply personal and universally human. The act of arranging, gluing, captioning, and decorating becomes an exercise in remembrance, a gentle revisiting of moments past. Letter writing, once a central form of communication, carries with it a kind of emotional weight that digital messages rarely match. The selection of stationery, the rhythm of handwriting, the pause for thought before each sentence, all these elements infuse the letter with presence. To receive a letter, unfolded slowly from its envelope, is to be touched by another person's time, care, and physicality. It is a gesture that lives on in drawers, boxes, and binders. Paper as proxy for affection and presence. Keepsakes made of paper, whether a child's drawing, others, such as Kara Walker, use black paper silhouettes to explore themes of race, history, and identity, drawing on the stark contrast between figure and ground to evoke powerful emotional responses. Her work challenges the viewer not only through content but through the medium itself, paper as both veil and reveal. Contemporary paper artists often engage with recycled or handmade papers, drawing attention to texture, imperfection, and process. They may incorporate found text, layering meaning through collage and assemblage, or explore the tension between durability and decay. In a world increasingly dominated by screens and pixels, these artists return us to the tactile, the material, and the intimate. Through paper, they speak to memory, body, nature, and time, reclaiming a medium that, though humble, remains infinitely expressive. Paper as a symbol of memory and intimacy. And finally, we arrive at a quiet but profound truth. That paper, more than many other materials, carries an emotional and symbolic weight rooted in memory and intimacy. It is not merely the content it bears, but the form itself, the texture, the scent, the crinkle, the fold, that evokes closeness and familiarity. Think of a love letter hidden in a drawer, its edges softened by time. A recipe card stained with butter, handwritten by a grandmother long gone. A school certificate, a birth announcement, a telegram. These are not just paper. They are touchstones of human experience. Paper is the stage upon which our most intimate gestures are performed. It absorbs not only ink but emotion, becoming infused with the moment of its making. When we send a condolence card, we offer presence through the tangible. When we keep a child's first drawing, we preserve a piece of fleeting time. When we reread a letter, we summon a voice. In literature and psychology, paper often symbolizes the subconscious, the hidden, the sacred. A blank page can represent possibility, or fear, or healing. A journal can be a friend, a letter, a bridge, a book, a sanctuary. Even in the digital age, we return to paper when we seek grounding. Bullet journals, planners, hand-drawn maps, sketchbooks. These analog tools offer respite from screens and serve as companions to the inward journey. Paper is memory that can be held, turned, touched. It bears the traces of hand and habit. And in this gentle capacity, to witness, to hold, to preserve, it continues to shape our identities, quietly and steadfastly. The decline of paper in the 21st century. As the world stepped into the 21st century, a quiet transformation began to take root. One not marked by thunderous upheaval or striking proclamations, but by the steady glow of screens and the subtle retreat of rustling pages. The dawn of the digital age, while anticipated by futurists and technologists for decades, brought with it a shift in how people interacted with information, communication, and memory. In boardrooms and classrooms, in banks and bedrooms, paper, once an unquestioned medium of exchange and expression, began to see its presence recede. The decline of paper has been observable in numerous ways. Newspapers that once thudded onto doorsteps now flicker in digital formats on handheld devices. Letters once carefully composed and posted now give way to instantaneous emails. Where once office workers sorted through files and memos, they now manage digital dashboards and cloud drives. Even greeting cards and invitations, those tangible tokens of thoughtfulness, have increasingly found life as electronic equivalents. The reasons for this shift are many. Digital systems offer speed and efficiency. They allow for storage without bulk, for communication without postage, for revision without waste. Environmental concerns too have played a role, with many businesses and institutions pledging to go paperless in a bid to reduce waste and cut down on deforestation. Paper's very virtues, its tangibility, its permanence, began to be seen, by some, as limitations in a world that prizes instantaneity and fluidity. And yet, even in this quiet decline, paper has remained present. For every digital transition, there has been an echo of nostalgia, a hesitation to part completely with the feel of a page or the permanence of ink. As we move deeper into the digital age, the story of paper does not end. It simply changes shape, taking on new roles and meanings in a world it once wholly defined. E-books, emails, and paperless offices. Perhaps no changes have symbolized the digital shift more than the rise of e-books and emails, and the widespread adoption of paperless offices. What once required ink, presses, envelopes, and files now happens silently, in pulses of light and waves of data. With the proliferation of e-readers and mobile devices, books that once occupied shelves now live in the cloud. Libraries stretch beyond walls, and messages reach their recipients in seconds, bypassing stamps and sorting centers. The e-book, in particular, has redefined the reading experience. It allows for adjustable fonts, built-in dictionaries, and vast portability. A single device may contain thousands of titles, accessible anywhere at any time. For travelers, commuters, and minimalists, this has been a revelation. Meanwhile, emails and digital memos have replaced most formal correspondence, offering convenience, searchability, and instantaneous delivery across continents. The paperless office, a concept first imagined in the 1970s, began to come into its own in the 2000s and beyond. Digital documentation, cloud-based collaboration tools, and electronic signatures transformed workflows. Filing cabinets emptied, printers sat idle, and meeting notes became shared documents, edited in real time by participants across the globe. Businesses touted the environmental benefits and cost savings, heralding a cleaner, more efficient age. But not all has been smooth or wholly embraced. The absence of paper has, at times, brought new challenges. Digital eye strain, data breaches, and the ephemeral nature of online content have led many to reevaluate the total elimination of paper. For all its seeming obsolescence, paper still offers something the digital world often cannot: tactility, independence from electricity, and a comforting sense of finality. In the shadow of digital convenience, paper remains a quiet memory. For some, the rustle of a turning page or the whisper of pencil on paper is a sensory experience unmatched by tapping and scrolling. Journaling, too, has seen a revival. Bullet journals, sketchbooks, and planners, often richly decorated and personalized, speak to a longing for analog space in a digital life. Writing by hand, many report, helps in organizing thoughts, calming the mind, and fostering creativity. The very slowness of paper-based activities becomes an antidote to the hurried pace of the online world. Even in professional and academic settings, printed materials still hold authority. Contracts, certificates, diplomas, and important letters are often still rendered on paper. There remains a trust, a sense of authenticity and formality that paper uniquely conveys. It is not simply about information, it is about presence, ritual, and significance. And so, even as the digital tide rises, paper endures in its niches, quiet, steadfast, and valued not for its ubiquity, but for its irreplaceable qualities. The role of paper in developing countries. While much of the digital transformation has swept through the developed world, paper remains a critical resource in many developing nations. In regions where access to electricity, internet, or digital devices is limited or unreliable, paper continues to play a central role in education, governance, and daily life. Schools across Africa, South Asia, and Latin America still rely heavily on paper-based textbooks, notebooks, and examinations. For millions of children, the act of writing with a pencil on a page is not only a means of learning but a rite of passage. Paper becomes the bridge between oral traditions and formal education, the surface upon which young minds begin to take shape. In rural areas, governmental procedures, voting, census-taking, land registration, often depend on physical documents. Birth certificates, passports, and identity cards are printed and archived on paper, offering stability in environments where digital systems may be nascent or inconsistent. Non-governmental organizations working in health, agriculture, and development often rely on paper for training materials, surveys, and record-keeping. In the absence of robust digital infrastructure, paper's portability and low cost make it indispensable. Furthermore, small-scale industries centered around paper, such as printing presses, bookbinding, and handmade paper production, offer livelihoods in communities where industrial employment is scarce. For artisans and entrepreneurs, paper represents not only culture but economic opportunity. Even as the world digitizes, paper remains a backbone for access, equity, and expression in places where the digital divide is wide. In this way, it continues to carry not just words, but hope and possibility. Hybrid systems, digital plus paper solutions. Recognizing the strengths and weaknesses of both paper and digital media, many institutions and individuals have moved toward hybrid systems, blending the best of both worlds in a model that honors efficiency without sacrificing humanity. In education, for example, a teacher may assign readings through an online portal while encouraging students to take handwritten notes for better comprehension. A student might draft essays on a laptop but plan them in a paper notebook. Exams may be administered digitally but prepared for on paper flashcards. This duality acknowledges that different tasks engage different modes of cognition. In healthcare, hospitals may digitize patient records while still using paper charts for bedside updates or quick access during emergencies. In courtrooms, legal briefs may be submitted electronically but printed for annotation during deliberation. Architects draft blueprints on tablets but print them to scale for on-site consultations. Artists sketch ideas in notebooks before refining them with digital tools. These hybrid models are not signs of indecision. They are signs of adaptation. They recognize that neither paper nor digital media is inherently superior. Rather, they serve different purposes, appeal to different sensibilities, and fulfill different needs. By integrating both, we craft systems that are not only more functional, but more humane, ones that honor memory and innovation, tradition and progress. Archives, libraries, and long-term storage. When considering permanence, few mediums rival paper. Long before hard drives and servers, humans relied on paper to store knowledge, history, and art. Even now, in the age of digital redundancy, archivists and librarians wrestle with the question of long-term preservation. How do we ensure that what we create and collect today will be accessible tomorrow? Digital storage offers efficiency, but it is not immune to obsolescence. File formats change, software becomes outdated, and hardware fails. A floppy disk, once state-of-the-art, is now nearly unreadable. Servers can crash, data can be corrupted, and cyberattacks can wipe out entire archives. By contrast, paper, if properly stored, can endure for centuries. Ancient manuscripts, illuminated codices, and printed books from the 15th century still lie intact in archives and libraries. Their physical presence resists deletion. They do not depend on electricity. They do not crash or glitch. They are vulnerable, yes, to fire, water, and decay, but their vulnerabilities are visible, knowable, and manageable. For this reason, many national libraries and research institutions maintain dual archives, digital and paper. Legal documents, treaties, and artworks are preserved in climate-controlled vaults. Conservationists restore and protect ancient papers with delicate care. The goal is continuity, not just for decades, but for generations. Paper, in this context, is not just a medium. It is a vessel of memory and legacy, trusted not in spite of its age, but because of it.